I watched her fold the same dresses she once wore just for me. Except this time, they weren't for me at all. She thought she was going on a secret vacation with him. But I made sure it wasn't me waiting at that airport, it was his fiancée. Karma doesn't whisper. It roars. If you've ever believed karma takes its time, trust MIT doesn't miss. Hit like, share this story, and subscribe for more. I used to think love felt like quiet mornings, the kind where you don't need words to feel safe. That's how it was with Leona. She'd wake up tangled in the sheets. Hair messy, but smiling like the world had paused just for us. She was the kind of woman who made you believe in permanence. The kind who made ordinary moments feel like they had weight. We planned this vacation for months. It wasn't just a trip. It was supposed to be a promise, a quiet reset after all the chaos of life. I'd pictured us walking through crowded streets, laughing at nothing, sharing late-night desserts in some small cafe, holding hands like we always used to. I thought we were solid, untouchable. But love doesn't always break like glass. Sometimes it rots slowly, like wood in the rain. It starts quietly, missed calls, half-hearted hugs, conversations that don't linger the way they used to. I noticed her smiling at her phone a little too often. I noticed her late returns, her excuses dressed up in soft lies. But I wanted to believe. God, I wanted to believe. One night, while she was in the shower, I opened her tote bag to look for my charger. That's when I found the folded printouts, the flight confirmation, the hotel booking. Her name was there, bright and bold, but next to it wasn't mine. I just stood there, staring at that piece of paper like it could explain itself. My heart didn't shatter, it went quiet. It's like a room right after someone slams the door. I could feel the blood drain from my face, and for the first time in years, I realized the woman I loved wasn't planning a trip with me. She was planning an escape from me. When you love someone, your mind becomes an expert at building excuses for them. That night, I told myself there had to be some mistake. Maybe the booking was wrong. Maybe it was a surprise trip I wasn't supposed to know about yet. It's strange how hope can make you lie to yourself so convincingly. She came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, humming like everything was normal. I watched her carefully, every movement slow, every word deliberate, as if I was seeing her for the very first time. She kissed me on the cheek, smelled faintly of lavender, and asked if I'd eaten. I almost wanted to ask her right there. Instead, I tucked the printouts back into her bag and smiled like nothing was wrong. That smile burned. Over the next few days, the air around us started to feel off. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. She held my hand, but her grip felt loose, like she was already letting go. Her stories became messy as small contradictions, misplaced timelines, the kind of lies people tell when they've convinced themselves you'll never notice. The night I finally asked her about the trip, she didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She just gave me a soft little laugh and said, "Oh, Kale, it's just a friend thing. You'll see later." That friend word carved into me like a knife. She said it to Izzy, to clean. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but something in me shifted. It wasn't heartbreak yet was the quiet before it. The kind of silence where you start seeing the cracks you've been trying to ignore. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face and a storm in my chest. The night I decided to confront her. The air inside our apartment felt heavier than usual. It was one of those still nights where every sound echoes too loudly. I sat at the edge of the bed, the flight confirmation folded neatly between my fingers, soft from how many times I'd held it. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was steady, like a man standing on the edge of something he already knows he'll lose. She walked in wearing that same smile she used to wear when everything between us was good. She threw her bag on the couch and said my name like nothing in the world was wrong. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw the performance. The carefully rehearsed tone, the fake warmth. I held up the paper without saying a word. Her eyes flickered, not panic, just calculation. That was worse. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. She just sighed softly, like I'd ruined the timing of a story she thought she controlled. "Kale," she said, voice calm to calm. "This isn't what you think."
But it was exactly what I thought.
I could see it in the way her shoulders relaxed, like the truth was a weight she'd been carrying. And now I was helping her drop it. She admitted it slowly, almost carelessly. The trip wasn't for us. It was for her and Damon. She called him by name, a name that shouldn't have existed between us. Then came the words that burned. I need more, Cam. You're safe. And I want excited. I didn't know. I didn't beg. I just sat there. The silence between us, louder than anything she could ever say. That's the moment I stopped being hers. I used to think heartbreak would feel like fire, but in that moment it felt like ice, slow, creeping, numbing everything it touched. I sat there, staring at her, while she stood in front of me like a stranger wearing Leona's face. Her eyes weren't soft anymore. They were sharp, cold, almost bored. That was the part that hurt the most. How easy it seemed for her. I finally asked her, how long? She didn't hesitate. That told me everything. She wasn't ashamed. She was done pretending. She started talking about how Damon made her feel alive, how she was tired of routines, tired of me being predictable. Every word landed like a quiet punch to the gut. I wasn't just losing her. She had already left long before the night. I stood up, not because I wanted to fight, but because sitting felt too small for what I was feeling. And this. I asked, holding up the ticket, is this your grand escape? Her jaw tightened. You wouldn't have understood, she said, like betrayal had a logic I was too naive to grasp. And then, almost like a switch flip, she'd slapped me. A clean, sharp slap that echoed through the room. Not out of guilt. Out of anger. Because I dared to catch her. For a second, I couldn't even feel my cheek. Just the silence that followed. She grabbed her bag like she'd already packed for this moment. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just walked to the door, heels clicking like a countdown. As it slammed behind her, everything inside me broke, but not in the way she'd expected. She thought she'd destroyed me. What she didn't know was that she'd just handed me the blueprint for her own downfall. The days after she walked out felt like moving through fog. Not because I missed her, but because the silence made everything louder. Every little lie she'd told started replaying in my head, like someone turning up the volume on a song I used to ignore. And beneath all of it, one name kept circling like a vulture. Damon. I didn't know much about him, just fragments. A voice I'd overheard once when she accidentally took a call in the kitchen. A text message she'd hurried to delete. But now, those fragments were enough to build a trail. I started digging not out of jealousy, but clarity. I needed to know the man she'd thrown everything away from. What I found wasn't what I expected. Damon wasn't just some reckless fool. He was engaged. His fiancée's name was Seraphine Clay, elegant, composed, the kind of woman Leona always secretly envied. I stared at her photo on his social media profile, my heart beat steady, my mind razor sharp. The irony of it almost made me laugh. Leona wasn't special. She was a secret, an affair tucked between wedding plans. She'd burned our life down for a man who was already building a future with someone else. I kept digging. Travel records, posts, tagged photos, flight dates, they lined up like a perfect puzzle. Damon had booked the same hotel, the same destination, just under a different timeline. He was planning to live two lives. And Leona, she was nothing but his side chapter. That realization didn't hurt. It didn't sting. It steadied me. For the first time since the night of the confrontation, I felt something close to control. If she thought betrayal was a game, she was about to learn what happens when I start playing too. I don't believe in coincidence. Finding Seraphine Clay wasn't luck. It was the universe handing me the sharpest tool I could ever use. I stared at her profile photo for a long time before sending that message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not because I doubted what I was about to do, but because I knew once I pressed send, there was no going back. The reply came fast, direct, no fake politeness. Just a single question. Why are you telling me this? I could almost hear the steel in her voice through the screen. So, I sent everything, the flight details, the hotel booking, the timeline, and Leona's name. I wasn't looking to convince her. The truth was already sharp enough. We met 2 days later at a small cafe, the kind where no one looks twice at anyone. She was calm to calm, the kind of calm that sits on top of rage. When I slid the printed bookings across the table, she didn't gasp or break down. She just looked at them, then at me, and whispered, "He doesn't know who he's dealing with." That's when I knew she wasn't just going to walk away. She wanted this exposed. She wanted Damon to feel what betrayal tastes like. And honestly, so did I. We planned it carefully. No screaming, no threats. Just precision. Seraphine would take my place on that flight. She would stand at the gate, Leona thought, was meant for me. No grand speeches. Just truth delivered in the most unforgettable way. When I walked out of that cafe, there was no hesitation left in me. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the quiet storm building right behind her perfect little lie. The morning of the trip felt strangely still, like the world had hit pause just long enough for me to breathe. Leona thought I was at home, nursing my heartbreak in silence. In reality, I was standing at a distance from the departure gate, watching everything unfold exactly the way we planned. She showed up early, dressed like someone stepping into the life she thought she'd stolen. I'd seen that smile before, the one that used to make me weak. But today, it didn't move me. Today, it disgusted me. She wheeled her suitcase with the kind of confidence only liars carry. Damon was already there, talking on the phone, distracted. The moment their eyes met, she lit up like this was the beginning of some perfect love story. And then, Seraphine stepped forward. I'll never forget Leona's face in that split second. She froze mid-step, confusion flickering into dread like a storm rolling in too fast. Damon's voice faltered, and his smile cracked. The air around them thickened. It wasn't a dramatic movie scene. It was quieter, sharper, the kind of silence that eats everything else alive. Seraphine didn't need to shout. She simply held up her ticket, her chin high, her eyes locked on Damon like a blade pressed against glass. People began to turn. Whispers spread like wildfire. Leona looked from Seraphine to Damon, her mouth opening but nothing coming out. Watching it from a distance felt almost unreal. This wasn't revenge wrapped in noise. It was clean, surgical. Everything she thought she'd controlled. Every lie. Every stolen moment crumbled at her feet in a single breath. And the best part? She had no idea I was watching the empire of her lies collapse, brick by brick from the shadows. The storm rolled in the moment the plane landed. Not outside, but inside her carefully crafted world. Eleanor's perfect weekend was slipping like sand through her fingers. She stepped into the luxury villa expecting adoration and control. Instead, the silence was thick, almost hostile. At the center of it all was Archer Vale, once her loyal accomplice, now unsettlingly calm. He greeted her with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything you wanted is right here," he said, voice smooth but chilling. Something in the way he said wanted made her stomach twist. Eleanor's unease grew when she noticed subtle changes, a different staff, no personal touches she'd arranged, and most of all, the guest list. People she hadn't invited mingled like they belonged. Her closest ally, Miranda, wasn't answering her calls. Then, during dinner, the real blow came. A huge screen flickered on. Hidden videos and messages she'd once sent Archer, mocking, plotting, manipulating, played in brutal clarity. Laughter echoed around her, but not the adoring kind she was used to. It was sharp, mocking, slicing. Archer leaned back, watching her unravel. "You built this empire on lies," he said, raising his glass. "Now you get to live in it." Eleanor's hands shook as faces turned toward her, some furious, some disgusted. Her grip on power snapped like glass under pressure. This was no romantic getaway. It was a stage. And she was the main act of her own destruction. As the night stretched on, Eleanor realized the trip she'd planned to control everyone else had become the moment everyone united against her. I never thought I'd see Eleanor brought to her knees. But that night, in the dim, golden glow of the villa's courtyard, it happened right before my eyes. The woman who once walked through every room as if she owned the world now looked hollow. The crowd had scattered after Archer's final toast, but the whispers lingered like smoke. Eleanor sat alone at the head of the long glass table, the same seat she'd claimed with arrogance hours earlier. Her perfect hair was undone, mascara streaking down her face. Her once unshakable voice cracked as she tried to call Miranda again. No answer. What she didn't know was that Archer hadn't acted alone. All the people she'd betrayed had quietly aligned, and I'd been part of it. Every lie she told, every life she manipulated, came crashing down at once. Her bank transfers were frozen, her board position revoked, and the engagement she bragged about? Gone. I stood at the far end of the courtyard, watching her hands tremble as her carefully built empire slipped through her fingers. For years, she laughed at other people's pain. Tonight, the universe laughed back. She tried to stand tall, but when the reporters arrived, she flinched at the flash of every camera. Archer walked past her without a glance. The final act wasn't explosive. It was quiet, humiliating, unforgettable. This wasn't revenge served hot. It was colder, sharper. A mirror held up to every cruelty she'd dealt. Eleanor had built her kingdom on the bones of others, and now that kingdom had buried her alive. As the sun climbed over the horizon, the villa didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt silent, almost peaceful. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't walking through someone else's shadow. I was standing in my own light. Eleanor was still inside, trying to stitch together the ruins of her story, but the damage was permanent. Every person she had deceived, every life she'd tried to control had finally slipped beyond her grasp. And me? I wasn't a casualty anymore. I was the storm that turned her empire to dust. I walked through the courtyard, feeling the faint sting of morning breeze on my skin. Reporters were packing up. The board's representatives were leaving with their quiet satisfaction. And Archer? He stopped for a second, gave me a nod, not out of friendship, but respect. We both knew this wasn't about her anymore. It was about justice. When I opened the heavy wooden doors, Eleanor's eyes found mine. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd once trusted, polished, powerful, untouchable. But beneath the makeup and designer dress, there was just a fractured soul who finally met her reflection. "I never thought you'd be the one to do this," she whispered. "No," I said, calm and steady. "You did this to yourself." I didn't need to raise my voice. My silence spoke louder than anything. I turned my back to her, something I once thought I'd never be strong enough to do. As I stepped outside, the sky stretched wide and unshakable above me. For the first time, the weight of her betrayal wasn't mine to carry anymore. This was my final stand, and I'd already won. Betrayal doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or rage. It sneaks in quietly, dressed in smiles and whispered excuses, until one day, you wake up and realize someone you trusted has already rewritten your world without your permission. That's what happened with Eleanor. I thought I had lost everything when she walked out of my life. But what I learned is that loss isn't always what it seems. Sometimes, it's the first step toward clarity. I've spent weeks replaying that night in my mind, every word, every pause, every lie. And the thing I've come to understand is this: revenge isn't about anger. It isn't about screaming or striking while the world watches. True justice is quiet, patient, calculated. It waits for the right moment, strikes in silence, and leaves no room for regret. Watching Eleanor face the consequences of her own choices, knowing she could never touch me again, was the most peaceful victory I've ever felt. The weight of betrayal lifted off my shoulders. I walked away that day knowing one simple truth: betrayal doesn't need a scream. It only needs silence and the right timing. And when karma does its work, nothing else is required.